In the last few weeks, we have studied how David showed love for his friends. And last week, we showed how David showed love for his enemies. So today, we will see how David demonstrated his love for God by demonstrating love for people. And interestingly, today we will see how David showed grace and love to someone who is completely different than himself. Just as a note, David means beloved. And in this story, David is a figure of God, like the love of God in our lives. And as we read this story, I would like you to consider, who are you in this story? We are going to read a comment from the author of this Sunday school lesson, Kevin Mellish. And he writes, David's devotion to Saul's family extended back to his deep friendship with Saul's son and heir, Jonathan. When Saul had taken David to be his servant, David became close to Saul's children and became like a son to the king. David and Jonathan in particular formed a deep bond of respect and admiration. Saul had already been killed in a battle with the Philistines, and the Philistines had the tradition, it was from the peoples around Israel, that when a king was defeated, they would also kill all his descendants. And by this time, of course, David was king in Israel. So let's read 2 Samuel 9. David asked, Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David. And the king said to him, Are you Ziba? At your service, he replied. The king asked, Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? Ziba answered the king, There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. Where is he? The king asked. Ziba answered, He is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lodebar. So King David had him brought from Lodebar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. So, in these verses, why was David searching for any descendants left of Saul? As I read a few moments ago, there was a covenant between David and Jonathan. They were very good friends and they loved each other deeply, that they weren't going to harm each other's families. And that's very important to consider. David was hoping he could fulfill his vows, his promise to his best friend, Jonathan. I would like to read to you for a moment another comment. Do you consider yourself a trustworthy person? Are you the type of person who keeps their word? It is very important that we consider the promises and the vows we may have made in the past. David emphasized that he wanted to show God's kindness to any remaining relatives of King Saul. David was doing this out of duty to an old oath, also out of love for his friend Jonathan, and finally because David wanted to show the kindness of God to any surviving relative. And of course, David was the most appropriate person to make an effort to demonstrate the kindness of God towards someone, especially a relative that is in hiding, that he may be thinking they are hunting me down to kill me. If we think about David, he was the last son of Jesse. He was not counted among his sons, and his own siblings mistreated him. And being the last child, probably there wasn't really much consideration of his person. So what future would he have had? But God showed kindness to King David, and he rose to be the king of the nation of Israel. And of course, David, better than many people in Israel, understood what was the kindness of God. That's why he was searching for a surviving relative of King Saul. One note that I would like to make is that Mephibosheth was the oldest son of Jonathan, and Jonathan was Saul's heir. And he was the ranking heir in Saul's throne. In 2 Samuel 4:4, the Bible tells us that when Mephibosheth was 5 years old, his nurse picked him up as she was trying to flee when they were killing all the descendants of King Saul. But as she was quickly fleeing, she fell and he became disabled. And he was in hiding in a place called Lodebar. The meaning of the word Lodebar is without pasture. Geographically speaking, we understand that Lodebar was a very remote, a very arid place, and that was probably the perfect place for Mephibosheth to hide.